Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Tuesday, April 5th regular meeting of the Walnut Creek City Council. The City Council is conducting this meeting from the City Council chamber, and staff are complying with the current regulations of the California Department of Public Health and Cal OSHA for safe indoor meetings. As a courtesy and technology permitting, members of the public may continue to provide live, remote, oral public comment via the city's Zoom video conferencing platform. Excuse me. However, the city cannot guarantee that the public's access to teleconferencing technology will be uninterrupted, and technical difficulties may occur from time to time. Members of the public desiring to provide comments at the meeting are encouraged to attend the meeting in person, as many of you have. You got the memo. As some attendees may be participating in their first Walnut Creek City Council meeting or their first teleconference meeting, I wanted to welcome everyone and talk briefly about the public comment process. For each agenda item, there will be an opportunity for public comment on the item. Thus, if you desire to speak to an item on the agenda this evening, please hold your comments until the council considers that item. Additionally, we have a section on the agenda entitled Public Communications, which is for public comments for items not on the agenda. Any comments during public communication should not relate to an item that is on the agenda this evening. Consistent with Section 9.5 of the City Council Handbook, 30 minutes will be initially allocated for public communication for items not on the agenda. Additional time for public communications for items not on the agenda will be provided at the end of the open session portion of the meeting if necessary. When I open the public comment period, please use the raise hand feature or press *9 if you're connected by audio only, which will alert staff that you have a public comment you would like to provide. We ask that everyone who wishes to speak on an item, please use the raise hand feature to state your intent to speak when the item is called. If you're attending in person, you don't need to raise your hand, but please complete a yellow speaker identification card and line up behind the lectern at the appropriate time. Wait your turn, and once brought into the meeting, state your name and city of residence for the record. Please note that in-person public comments will be taken before any remote public comments. Please also keep in mind that this is a city business meeting. The City Council has adopted rules of decorum to ensure that meetings are conducted efficiently and effectively and that all members of the public have a full, fair, and equal opportunity to be heard. All remarks should be addressed to the City Council. Please do not use profanity during your comments. Given the COVID-19 pandemic and the increased number of speakers that have wanted to make comments on various issues during our meetings, and consistent with city policies related to public comments, each speaker will have 2 minutes to make your remarks. The Zoom feed for each speaker will automatically cut off at 2 minutes. The council will accept oral comments. Written comments submitted and received up to 2 hours before the meeting have been posted to the city's website for public review and are included in the meeting, but will not be separately read into the record. To provide a live, remote public comment, join the Zoom video conference meeting. The meeting ID and password are, the ID is 863-5028-8714, and the passcode is 033963. Should you choose to not provide comments but would like to view this meeting, you may do so in one of the following ways. YouTube Live, visit the City of Walnut Creek's YouTube channel. Cable broadcast, Comcast Channel 28, in Incorporated Walnut Creek, Rossmore Channel 26, Wave Channel 1028, and AT&T UVerse Channel 99. You can also live stream the meeting online on the city's website. At this time, please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Would the city clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Darling?
Here.
Councilmember Haskew?
Here.
Councilmember Wilk?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Silva?
Here.
Mayor Francois?
Here. Next on our agenda is a presentation and proclamation for Cleaner Contra Costa Month. April, as many of you know, is Earth Month, and the city is currently in the process of updating its Sustainability Action Plan in order to achieve our climate action goals and to enhance environmental sustainability. Tonight, we will be highlighting the work of one of our local partners on sustainability, Sustainable Contra Costa. Sustainable Contra Costa is here to share information about the Cleaner Contra Costa Challenge, a program that allows residents to take action to reduce their own household's climate impact. The City of Walnut Creek has been proud to sponsor with Sustainable Contra Costa over the last 7 years so that they can offer these tools and information to our residents. With that, I'm very pleased to turn it over to Laura Werley, Walnut Creek resident, community outreach volunteer with Sustainable Contra Costa, to share more about the Cleaner Contra Costa Challenge. Welcome, Laura.
Thank you so much, Mayor. Can you all hear me?
We can.
Okay, thank you everyone for having me here. And I assume I can share my presentation with you, so hopefully this will work okay. Okay, can you guys see this?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Oops, pardon me. Okay. So thank you so much for having me. I'm Laura Werley with Sustainable Contra Costa, and I wanted to take a couple minutes to share an update with you on the Cleaner Contra Costa program. I'll quickly mention that Sustainable Contra Costa is a nonprofit that started in 2008. Together, we've helped thousands of people learn to live more sustainably and make changes to save water, energy, reduce waste, and build a healthier, more resilient community. Our programs include the Cleaner Contra Costa Challenge, which I'll talk to you about tonight. We have various workshops, leadership and sustainability awards. We have a youth program called SLEA, which stands for Sustainable Leaders in Action, and many more programs. The challenge was created in 2019 through a partnership between us, Contra Costa County, the cities of San Pablo, Antioch, and you all in Walnut Creek, and we're so thankful for you all for being an early adopter to this program. The initial funding came from a grant from the Bay Area Air Quality Management District. We now have 8, actually I believe we have 9 cities participating. We just got Concord on board too, it's exciting. And the online platform is free and it's open to anyone who lives or works in Contra Costa County. It's available in both English and Spanish. So this is what this landing page looks like when you get on it. It's nicknamed the Fitbit for sustainability because the Cleaner Contra Costa Challenge allows you to track your reduction in water, gas, carbon, just like the Fitbit program does for exercise. The website makes it easy for people to learn sustainable solutions and provides practical actions that can be taken to conserve resources, save money, improve our health, and support our local economy. So this is, when you go into the website, this is what the action category page looks like. There are now over 90 different actions on the platform within each one of these categories. There's a new resilience category you can see at the bottom. This is exciting. It's a new category that helps people create an emergency plan, prepare their homes for extreme weather events and disasters, and work with their neighbors to create a resilient, connected community in situations like that, emergency situations. It has this particular wildfire category and air quality category, so it's especially helpful for Californians. When you click into an action, you can see how much impact that action will make, such as how much carbon or water will be saved based on the points there. I think it's 10, I would say 1 point for every pound of carbon or 10 gallons of water, depending on what type of action it is. And you can see in this one, if you eat lower down the carbon chain, such as taking out 1 red meat meal a week, you can save at least $100 a year. Doesn't that seem kind of low? I think that number is a little low. But anyway, you can understand that you will have a cost savings, and it'll tell you if there's any upfront costs, which most of our actions do not have that. At the bottom of each action, you can see the resources for your zip code. So for example, this action is installing a heat pump water heater, and the Bay Ren program would give you a rebate up to $1,500 if you did something like this. So it's beneficial. If you log in with your zip code, it'll tell you how you can save money in your area. The challenge really is something for everyone. There's actions for renters like choosing 100% green energy, family-friendly actions such as skip the packaging, and things that take a bigger commitment such as buy or lease an electric vehicle. As we know, things are always more fun when working together. So the leaderboard shows the progress of the 60 and more teams and community groups that we have participating. And I would love to get any of your staff on board and create a team and have maybe some friendly competition if anybody wants to get involved with taking some sustainability steps. For Walnut Creek, we've got some great progress. You can see we've had 310 households join, and our goal is to get 500 this year. You can see you've saved almost 100 tons of CO2 just within Walnut Creek. The gallons of water, over 133,000. And the interesting thing I don't think people realize is the money saved here, over $32,000. Most of sustainable actions save money. There's big actions like solar and things like that, which cost money up front, but most of the actions save money. Overall, for Contra Costa County, we've had over 2,500 households join, and together we've saved all the numbers that you see here, over 1.5 million gallons of water, 23,000 gallons of gas, almost $300,000, and 738 tons of CO2. So quite significant when we all work together. And you can see the steady decline in CO2 we've had over the years that we've been running this program. That's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for letting me speak. I'm grateful to you all, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Laura. Any questions for Laura or about sustainable Contra Costa? So before you go, I'd like to read the proclamation that we have honoring Earth Month and recognizing April as Cleaner Contra Costa Challenge Month. And you'll be getting a hard copy of this delivered to you or your office, but I'll read it now. That whereas the health of our environment, economy, and community is essential for current and future generations, whereas the City of Walnut Creek partners with Sustainable Contra Costa County, and the cities of Antioch, Pittsburgh, Moraga, and Martinez to provide an online platform, which we've just seen, called Cleaner Contra Costa, where residents can find practical solutions and local resources to take meaningful climate action and track results. And whereas the Cleaner Contra Costa Challenge inspires residents to join forces with neighbors, friends, and community groups to support each other's efforts and work together to create cleaner, healthier, and more vibrant communities for all. And whereas actions taken through Cleaner Contra Costa will have the added benefit of reducing greenhouse gas emissions, saving money, and advancing community goals for health, safety, economic vitality, energy independence, and quality of life. And whereas the Cleaner Contra Costa Challenge serves to bring awareness and local action to the pivotal issues facing our planet and supporting ways to conserve resources and invest in local solutions for the benefit of all community members. Whereas the City of Walnut Creek has been a partner in this collaborative effort for over 7 years, and whereas residents, businesses, community groups in Walnut Creek are encouraged to form teams and take action together on climate change at cleanercontracosta.org. Now, therefore, I, Matt Francois, Mayor of the City of Walnut Creek, on behalf of the City Council, do hereby proclaim this month of April 2022 as Cleaner Contra Costa Month in the City of Walnut Creek, and encourage everyone in the community to come together in action for a healthy, clean, and sustainable county, and encourage all community members to join the Cleaner Contra Costa Challenge.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for inspiring us. Thank you for all the hard work you're doing and for the work of the entire Sustainable Contra Costa. We very much value the partnership and look forward to getting updates as they come in.
Thank you, my pleasure.
Okay, and now this time we'll have another proclamation on our agenda for National Public Safety Telecommunications Week. And I invite Walnut Creek Police Department Dispatch Supervisor Tori Maxfield to the lectern to accept the proclamation. Let me make sure I get the right one first. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
You bet. There you go.
Thank you.
Please, would you like to please?
I do want to make just a comment that this is very special to have this acknowledgement. I appreciate Chief Knox bringing this forward to the council, bringing it to your awareness. As you may know, Chief Knox was a dispatcher, so he knows how special this is. Additionally, if you don't know, National Public Safety Telecommunicators Week started right here in Contra Costa County in 1981 with the Contra Costa Sheriff's Office. So it can't get much closer to my heart. So thank you so much.
Chief, would you like to make some comments?
Yes, just briefly. So I've worked at 5 different agencies, and I would put our dispatchers against any dispatchers in the state. They do an exceptional job. The Walnut Creek residents should feel very proud that when you call 911, you are getting the very best of the best answering that call. So I'm very appreciative of our staff. They do a great job.
Thank you, Chief. The council is in full agreement with that and consensus. Thank you for all the hard work you do. You're on the front lines, making sure that those important emergency calls get routed appropriately, and we value your work. The whole community does. So thank you. Next on the agenda is the consent calendar. Does any council member wish to pull an item for discussion?
I'd like to pull item 2C.
Okay, and I would like to pull item 2E. Would any member of the public like to comment on an item on the consent calendar? If you're here in person, you could come to the lectern. And if you're on Zoom, please use the raised hand feature or press *9 if you'd like to comment on any item on the consent calendar. Please, go ahead.
Hi, my name's Allison Dale Moore. I've seen some of you before. This is my family. We live around the corner from the Planned Parenthood clinic in Walnut Creek. I volunteer there as a patient escort. I have for several years now. I'm used to volunteer work. I've been on school boards. I've worked with Costa to help with kids in foster care as a court-appointed special advocate. And I'm a librarian. I have a special interest in free speech and the First Amendment. And I can tell you what I've seen and what I've heard. I've been in contact with the police department quite a bit about the rabble that's been going on there. But right now, I'd like to talk about what we hear when we're there. A lot of our protesters have taken to having microphones and megaphones. And
If you can't speak into the microphone.
I'm
ma'am.
sorry.
No problem.
Yeah.
It adjusts too.
That would be appropriate. Yeah, and so they're very loud. You can hear them inside the building. I was there this morning on a shift, and I could hear them inside the building. In the past month, there's been one instance when people who were not going to the clinic were standing at the bus stop, and there were 2 megaphones around them. Things were very loud and chaotic. The bus whizzed by once. You know, the person standing there didn't speak English. It was a bad situation. As an advocate of free speech, I have to say, when they use their megaphones to sing the old rugged cross, we don't mind. The people who are trying to get people in safely for their medical appointments don't mind. But what they do is target individual patients, catcall them and the people who are with them, accuse them of terrible things, using terrible language, and they frighten them, they intimidate them, they harass them, and they move from both where you can drive into the clinic and also the back where you have to walk up the stairs. You don't have any choice but to go up there. They can get pretty close, and they've got their megaphones, and you can hear them right in the waiting room.
Thank you for your comments. You're 2 minutes up. I gave you a little extra time because I interrupted you about the mic, but I
Thank you very much.
appreciate you coming tonight. Would any other members of the public like to address the council on an item on the consent calendar? Not seeing any in the chambers. And Madam Clerk, do we have anyone on Zoom?
Yes, we do have a hand raised on Zoom. We have Robin Pepino.
Okay, I'm sorry that, am I on now?
You are welcome.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, I'm Robin Papano-Kuntz of Antioch, a weekly volunteer patient escort at the Walnut Creek Planned Parenthood. As you know, I strongly support the buffer zone ordinance and the sound ordinance that is being researched. The protesters present safety hazards to clients, the people who accompany them, the protesters themselves, and other passersby. You already know that I regularly see pedestrians, sometimes with dogs, move onto the street to avoid the protesters. The protesters also stop or attempt to stop cars entering the parking lot. I've seen cars picking up or dropping off people on the street in or near the traffic lanes, also blocking the entrance to the lot. I assume this is to avoid the protesters. And this morning, I was inside the health center checking in for my shift, and a protester with a voice amplification was so loud that I could actually hear it inside the health center with the door closed, the exterior door closed. That should not be allowed to continue to happen. People also stop in the bus area to talk to the protesters. Just today, a white pickup pulled over there, and the rear of the truck must have been sticking out into the traffic lane because another car beeped at him and slowed down to go around. For those reasons and more, I support the buffer zone ordinance.
Thank you, ma'am. Any other speakers on Zoom?
No additional speakers on Zoom.
Okay, we'll close the public comment on the consent calendar, and I would entertain a motion on the consent calendar with the exception of items 2C and 2E.
Move to approve consent calendar items 2A, B, D, F, and G.
Second.
Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Mayor Pro Tem Silva,
Aye.
Councilmember Haskew,
Yes.
Councilmember Darling,
Yes.
Councilmember Wilk,
Aye.
Mayor Francois.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
Okay, the first item pulled was item 2C, and we'll go to Councilmember Will.
Thank you, Mayor. And regarding 2C in the buffer zone item, I'm happy to see on the this on the consent calendar for our second reading. This has been a long time coming. We've had a lot of complaints over the last couple of years, and I appreciate everybody that's spoken on this, and certainly the people that have given us quite an idea of what has happened out there that they see. And I would like to ask staff regarding the noise report, which we talked about at the last meeting, to please bring that report on noise as soon as possible, not to exceed 6 months, so that we can then review at that point and see if there is anything that needs to be added to the current ordinance. And with that, I'd like to make a motion to approve it.
And I'll second that.
Any further comment or discussion?
Yes, I have.
Yes.
Thank you very much. And I agree. I'm glad we are moving forward with this and that we need to address the noise as soon as possible. But I'm also curious about the reports now that protesters are basically in the parking lot, which is, I thought the intent was they weren't supposed to be. So do we have an issue that we're not addressing?
Jamie Knox, Chief of Police. Not to my knowledge, I don't recall seeing any significant calls on our shift log, but it's something that we could look into. But we would encourage Planned Parenthood to call the police department if people are going to violate the ordinance or causing a disturbance.
Because the parking lot serves as private property,
Correct.
so they cannot trespass on private property
That's correct, but they would actually have to call us.
in order to have that happen.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion by Councilmember Wilk, a second by Councilmember Darling. Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Councilmember Wilk.
Aye.
Councilmember Darling.
Aye.
Councilmember Haskew.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Silva.
Aye.
Mayor Francois.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
Okay, and the second item that I pulled from the consent calendar was the is item 2E, a memorandum of understanding with the Walnut Creek Aquatic Foundation for contribution of funding to the construction of a new aquatic facility at Heather Farm Park. I'm particularly excited about this item and about the public-private nature of this agreement. It's a part of a legacy of this city when we have major capital facility needs to partner with the community. We have a very generous community, and we've fundraised in the past for the new library building. Our award-winning Aquanuts have fundraised for an expansion of the Larky Pool. And now we have a new group coming forward and willing to partner with us on fundraising for a new swim center at Heather Farm. So I'm very excited about this, and I think this is exactly the type of thing we want to encourage in our community, and I appreciate the Aquatics Foundation for their partnership on this. I believe we might have a member or so of the Aquatics Foundation on the line, and I would invite them to speak.
Yes, we'll bring in Jim King.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can. Welcome, Mr. King.
Yes, Jim King here from the Wally Creek Aquatic Foundation. Thank you very much for the opportunity to both join in acknowledging the work that's been done by Walnut Creek staff and the Aquatic Foundation Board to arrive at this point of a memorandum of understanding going forward to support aquatic facilities and programs in Walnut Creek. We have met several times with staff, with Kevin and Karen, with Dan, and we have worked many hours to put together this memorandum of understanding, which you have before you and have had a chance to review. We are ready and excited about going ahead with the project and looking forward to contributing to fundraise for a portion of the cost and work together to get this facility built in the coming years. Happy to answer any questions you might have, but those are my remarks.
Thank you, Mr. King. I don't see any questions. We just want to, again, express our heartfelt thank you to you and the Aquatics Foundation. I also want to personally recognize Arts and Recreation Director Kevin Safine. I know he put in a lot of hard work to see this to fruition. So thank you for partnering with us, and we look forward to a ribbon cutting sometime in the future.
Yes, and let me just reemphasize what you just said, Mayor, that Kevin and Karen really put in long hours and put up with I think a lot of our nitpicking along the way, but it was a very collegial and very positive interaction. And so again, we thank them, we thank Dan as well, and also the City Council for your support in this.
All right, well, thank you again, and with that, I'll make the motion to approve item 2E.
Second.
Third.
There was a race to second that one. I will give that to Councilmember Haskew.
Thank you. Mayor Francois,
Aye.
Councilmember Haskew,
Yes.
Councilmember Darling,
Aye.
Councilmember Wilk,
Aye.
and Mayor Pro Tem Silva.
Aye, and I'd just like to add that we look forward to helping the Walnut Creek Aquatics Foundation and supporting their fundraising, as we have done for so many other projects and so many other organizations.
Motion carries.
Thank you. So we're moving on to public communications. This portion of the meeting is reserved for comment on items not on the agenda. Under the Brown Act, the council cannot act on items raised during public communications, but may respond briefly to statements made or questions posed, request clarification, or refer the item to staff. Consistent with Section 9.5 of the City Council Handbook, 30 minutes will be allocated at this time for public communications for items not on the agenda. Additional time for public communications for items not on the agenda will be provided at the end of the meeting if necessary. If any member of the public wishes to provide public comments and they're connected by Zoom, please use the raised hand or feature or press *9 if you're connected by audio only, letting us know that you'd like to make a comment during public communications. As a reminder, each speaker will have 2 minutes to make their oral remarks, and the Zoom feed cuts off automatically at 2 minutes. Written comments submitted have been posted to the city's website for public review and are included in the meeting record, but will not be separately read into this record. At this time, I will note that the time is 6:30. And we will take public comments on items not on the agenda until approximately 7 p.m., and then the remainder of any such comments at the end of the open session portion of the meeting. I would invite any members that are here in the audience that would like to address the council during public communications to please step forward to the lectern. You can add your yellow, if you don't have your card filled out already, you can fill it out afterwards and hand it to the clerk, and welcome.
Hello, I'm Michelle Sheehan. I'm the founder of Save Seven Hills Ranch and a Walnut Creek resident. Will you raise your hand if you're here to express support for Save Seven Hills Ranch tonight? Okay. I miscounted. We have a lot more than I thought we did. Great. So as you can see, that is a message we want to bring to you tonight, that there are a lot of us here, and not only that, to remember that the people who have signed the petition, we have now about 3,400 signatures, that they are asking the county to deny the general plan amendment, which is requested by a developer for Seven Hills Ranch. As you know, such a change would allow the massive multi-level proposal to be plunked right next to the Heather Farm Park, our creek, and next to our low and moderate density neighborhoods. We struggle to see the benefits for Walnut Creek. The draft EIR has been issued on the proposal. I don't want to be flippant, but you don't have to read it. Because if you have seen Seven Hills Ranch, its rolling natural hills with its oak woodlands, its wildlife and bird life, and then if you have seen the proposal, which would level all but one hill, remove 410 trees, 350 which are protected, pave over about 90% of the property, then you know, of course, the proposal would have an extremely significant environmental impact that cannot be mitigated. This proposal is in reality the complete devastation of the existing natural environment. The report doesn't really say this. That is why we trust and hope that your staff, which did a very good job commenting on the NOP last August, will find and question the assumptions and missing evidence in a report which does not state the obvious. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sheehan. So I would just thank you. I understand the inclination to want to applaud, but if you can, please refrain. Maybe take a cue from the Oscars, and you want to wave your hands, we'll understand. We know you're all here. You raised your hands in support. Thank you.
Hi, good evening. My name's Lauren Farr, and I'm one of the few natives from Contra Costa County and a registered voter. And I'm here also to speak in regards to Seven Hills. I'd like to bring to the attention that several years ago, a development was happening downtown on the corner of Mount Diablo Boulevard and Main Street, where a heritage oak tree was located, and the plans had to be greatly amended to develop that parcel of land in order to save that heritage oak tree. This kind of sets a precedent. We just read a report a few days ago that our climate is in bigger danger than we thought, and it's kind of our job to leave a legacy to the people who come after us to protect what's already here. I understand that we can't stop progress, but we can develop it in a thoughtful and profitable way that everybody will have a chance to enjoy the area. I'd also like to point out that our logo is a tree. And perhaps it would be a wise idea to honor our logo and save the 350 heritage oak trees that are on that property. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Next speaker.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Ronnie Regato. I live at 1515 Riviera Avenue in Walnut Creek, right behind the Jack in the Box next to the Chevron station. North Main Street is a drag strip and an extras movie set for Fast and Furious constantly. It's like trying to put out a dumpster fire with a confetti cannon. It's not going to work. And this is a very popular item. It's called Street Roar. It's an exhaust system, aftermarket, that all the muffler stores are installing in all sorts of cars. Cars that go 0 to 60 in 2.5 hours, sound like they're going 1,000 miles an hour. I have a recent experience of being with friends and family on the outdoor dining that's opened up in Walnut Creek on Main Street and at the Cheesecake Factory, and cars that go by are obeying all the speed laws, but they wind up these aftermarket exhaust systems, and the elderly people that I'm with that have hearing aids, it just destroys the ambient quality of sitting down to outdoor dining that opened up. So I don't know what can be done. I don't know the solution to it. I just know that you can't really confront the people that do this because they enjoy doing it. It's like a 2-year-old with a hammer, and the rest of the city is a damn nail. So, and you know what? They'll shoot you. They'll kill you. They're just looking for conflict, and this is the way that they want to impose their will on everybody. So I know that there's noise ordinance, but I have to tell you that North Main Street and Parkside is a drag strip. And there's 2,000 cars a day that go past there. And with the Lamborghini dealership and the Bentley dealership and the Dodge dealership, 100 miles an hour is common speed for these vehicles with all these high-quality exhaust systems. So I live right behind the Jack in the Box, and I have to tell you, they do an outstanding business with drive-through, but I don't sleep at night because all the cars come in and they're just winding up, and I haven't slept in about 2 years that I've lived there for 3 years. So there it is.
Thank you, Mr. Regato. Thank you for coming tonight. Any other members in the chamber would like to address the council on an item that's not on the agenda tonight? Please come forward.
My name is Shirley Mcgrath. I live at 563 Matterhorn Drive, and it's right adjacent to Seven Hills School and Seven Hills Ranch. And I just briefly would ask you, each and every one of you, to go to the website called Save Seven Hills Ranch. I just went there recently, and it is so beautiful. Michelle has done a wonderful job of creating really what would be lost if we had a very high density development. So I really, really appreciate the opportunity to have you listen tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. McGrath.
Hello, I'm Mike Young. I live at 592 Matterhorn Drive in Walnut Creek, and our home is adjacent to the proposed Seven Hills Ranch property. And I've been reading the environmental impact report, especially with regard to Kinross Drive, which is an entrance and an exit that the developers have proposed. The EIR says that Kinross Drive exit and exit does have an effect on the environment for biological reasons. And the EIR, as a result of that, suggests another entrance into the project, which does not affect the environment. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
My name is Claudia Soto, and actually I'm neighbor with Mike. And there is one thing I also wanted to point out is the traffic. I am a real estate agent, and we have been told for many, many years by the city of Walnut Creek that the traffic on Ignacio Valley Road and Treat Boulevard cannot hold any more cars. By developing that massive community, it will create not more traffic, but also discomfort for everybody in the community. We're not going to be able to get to work as easy as we do today, and today is already hard. So that's also another impact that these builders are creating, and I want to point that out. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Soto. Are there any other members in the chamber that would like to address the council during public communications? I'm not seeing any, so we'll turn to Zoom.
Mayor, I don't see any hands raised on Zoom for comment.
Okay, then we'll close public communications. Obviously, we have a lot of folks here tonight concerned about the Seven Hills Ranch project. So I'll turn to our city manager and ask if he can give us an update about the project, the city's involvement in this versus the county, and where things are in the process.
Yeah, good evening, Dan Buckshire, City Manager. You know, as a few speakers noted, this project does fall within the jurisdiction of the county, more specifically under the County Board of Supervisors. It is not within the city limits of Walnut Creek. That said, obviously, we are aware of potential impacts to the city and surrounding areas. As one of the speakers noted, staff has been tracking this project closely, as previously provided input. We are reviewing the draft environmental impact report that is out for public review that was referenced this evening, and we do intend to provide a set of comments by the due date, which is May 10th. And I would encourage anybody else who is reviewing the draft environmental impact report to provide their comments to the county for consideration. The process after May 10th is that obviously all of the public comment will be reviewed and then gathered, summarized. I would imagine it will be extensive. And then the county will publish that feedback as it looks to finalize the environmental impact report. Once the report is done, the project would be brought forward to the County Planning Commission and then ultimately to the County Board of Supervisors sometime, I assume, later this year. We don't know the exact date. So that is the process. I do want to assure the council and the members of the public that staff is tracking this closely to identify impacts and any concerns that we may highlight that may not already be addressed in the current draft report.
Okay, Mayor Pro Tem Silva.
Thank you very much. Can someone, will there be public notification of when the Planning Commission for the county will be meeting on this, which I assume would be late summer based on kind of like a time frame?
Yes, there will be public noticing requirements as part of the Planning Commission. That's correct.
So one of the things that would be important would be for members of the public to sign up to receive notifications from the County Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors on this item or maybe any item that might be coming forward in the unincorporated areas of Walnut Creek. Is that a safe recommendation?
Yes, agreed.
And then from the Planning Commission, if it receives a positive recommendation from the County Planning Commission, it goes to the Board of Supervisors for review and final opine on what to do with the project.
That is correct. The County Board of Supervisors would be the final decision maker on this project.
And this is in which district of the Board of Supervisors? I think it's District 4 Supervisor Mitchoff. Am I correct?
Correct.
So also comments can be sent to the members of the Board of Supervisors.
Correct.
Any other questions of the city manager? Yep, Councilmember Darling.
As this process goes forward, I'm assuming that the city's comment letter on the draft environmental document will also be available to the public if they wish to get a copy of it.
Yes, it would. It would be a public record once it's issued.
Okay, let's see, the other comment that we had was in terms of noise issues on North Main and throughout downtown, and obviously we have a noise ordinance and speeding as well, and maybe the chief could talk a little bit about some of the enforcement challenges we have and successes and what we're doing in that regard.
Yeah, I'll speak briefly to a lot of the new vehicles coming out now actually have programmable exhaust, from my understanding. So our traffic division has been working closely to examine the vehicle code and find out what exactly we can do to enforce some of the vehicle code laws related to the excessive exhaust noise. We hear it here in the city building as well, and it is frustrating. But if you imagine a motorcycle that, especially like a Harley Davidson, can be rather loud and doesn't necessarily violate any modified exhaust rules with the vehicles, it's much more difficult to detect a vehicle that has actually modified the exhaust in violation of the law. And sometimes just noise alone doesn't necessarily indicate that it's a violation. So we're still looking into some of this new technology that's coming out that's allowing people to modify their exhaust as part of programming the vehicle. And I do understand that there's been aftermarket products that people can affix to their exhaust. That would be illegal typically, but we will ramp up our enforcement efforts downtown.
And I think one just kicked.
Just right
Yeah,
up
it's
cue.
illustrating the point for sure.
And speeding, we still do enforce speeding, correct?
Absolutely.
All right. And I see 4 police officers in this room right now, so hopefully that word gets out too.
Yeah.
I did get a chance recently to ride along with one of the officers on a Saturday night, and relative to this, there was an individual exiting downtown, and they were just about ready to kick it into overdrive and make the exit that we've all seen, and that's when they spotted the officer, the patrol car that we were in, and they backed down immediately and drove like a normal person on their way out of town, so that was good.
But I would add for your officers' information, it happens at 7 a.m. as well, because I'm walking around downtown and you just go, what? So they can wake up to that noise and you can go to sleep to that noise.
Okay. Thank you, Chief, and thank you to all the members of the public who came tonight and talked during public communications for observing the hand rule and also keeping the comments succinct. We understand that Ms. Sheehan was speaking for a lot of you, and we appreciate you coming and letting us know your concerns. We're going to turn now to a next item, which is council member and staff announcements, reports on activities or requests.
This is the good stuff.
So I'll turn to the city attorney. First up is closed session announcements.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There were no closed session announcements. We did not have a closed session today.
Okay. Next item is city manager reports. Mr. Buckshire.
I do not have an update this evening, Mayor.
Okay, moving right along. Council member reports and assignments and various activities and upcoming events. Who would like to kick it off? Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you very much, Mayor. I will start by mentioning that I attended the Golden Rain Foundation board meeting for Rossmore as the liaison from the City Council, and I wanted to let staff as well as my council colleagues know that Rossmore leadership was very appreciative of the letter of support that we sent to the CAL FIRE, which is part of the Governor's Office of Emergency Services, for a potential climate change grant related to wildfire prevention, and they appreciated that. There was also discussion at Rossmore and the same about employment levels. They're having the same challenges that we're experiencing here at the city, in cities across the state and the nation, as well as in the private sector. They have two-thirds of their bus routes, bus drivers are vacant positions, so they have had to temporarily cancel Sunday bus service or weekend bus service. They have also had trouble reopening the pools because they do not have enough lifeguards. So they made a decision at the last board meeting, and it was a split vote to actually have some hours every day in those pools unlifeguarded. And there was a robust debate about that and what that could mean. So they are struggling, as we are as well, with unavailability of employees. They also then had a report from Tim O'Keefe, who is the executive director, who reminded the public as well as the board that of the employees at Rossmore who are leaving, the majority are citing disrespect from the residents as a primary reason for seeking other employment that might pay a little better as well. So whereas it in many ways had been a really great job in the past, and you know, sometimes when it's a really great job and people are respectful and you like the environment, it keeps people, even though there might be a better price someplace else. So that was unfortunate to hear. I had an opportunity about 3 weeks ago to speak at the State Planning Commissioners Academy, and I wanted to thank at least 2 of our planning commissioners who were in attendance. There were 360 planning commissioners from across the state at the Planning Commissioner Academy, which was in San Ramon, and that would be Melissa Ward and Ken Strongman were there. The Recycle Smart Board met last week, and we had one item that we have been discussing for a number of months, which is the potential. We're coming near the end of our 10-year franchise agreement, so we are having to make a decision as to whether we extend the contract for 2 years, which with each of the providers that provide hauling, recycling, processing, trash, et cetera, or should we basically start the process of developing a new franchise agreement and and negotiating a new agreement? And an ad hoc committee was formed of 4 board members, of which I was one, to bring a recommendation to the full board at an upcoming meeting. I wanted to thank the mayor for his State of the City presentation at the Chamber of Commerce last week. It was an exceptional presentation, and I appreciated the work you did to prepare for that and the work of staff in the Walnut Creek TV division for making it work despite some technical difficulties at the beginning when we could see you talking, but we couldn't hear you talking. And I would like to remind people that we are actually in an election season. The primary will be in June this year, and there will be a number of items on the ballot, including for most of Walnut Creek. You will be voting for one of 5 candidates to replace Supervisor Karen Mitchoff, who is not seeking re-election for District 4 for the County Board of Supervisors. So you have an opportunity, most of us will have I would say 2/3, if not 3/4 of us are actually located in District 4 now after the decennial redrawing. So, and I will leave it there. Thank you, Mayor.
That's great. I'll turn to Councilmember Darling.
Thank you. And a couple of the things that we did, in addition to watching State of the City and putting in the comments, they're working on the technical. I thought you did a great job, and I really liked the question and answer format this year. I think it worked really well for where we are. As Mayor Pro Tem mentioned, it is the election coming up. If anybody is interested, the East Bay leadership had a forum for the 5 supervisor candidates, and you can access that through the East Bay leadership and get an idea of what their issue, how each one of them would address the issues. Also, we had the first Cal Cities East Bay division meeting. Mayor Pro Tem Silva and Councilmember Wilk were there with me, and it was really wonderful to be able to meet many of since I'm new on council, there's a lot of people I only knew in little tiny boxes. And so it was really a great chance to meet people in person and figure out who's short and who's tall, but also to talk about a lot of the issues that are important to the cities of the East Bay. And then last night, I took my daughter to go see the Lesher Speaker Series, and it was just a wonderful presentation by a woman who has been the face of the pandemic on CNN, and it was a great talk, and it was some words of wisdom, and my daughter took that back. She's a nursing student at UC Davis, and she took it back to her clinical today and shared everything she heard last night, so it was a very good presentation. So that's my report.
That's great. Councilmember Wilk.
Great, thank you, Mayor. And in addition to county supervisor race that's coming up in June, there's a county recorder that people can vote for, the district attorney, the sheriff. So there's a big election coming up in June, and I hope that people are registered. And also, if you have a high school student that is about to turn 18 prior to that election in June, have them register as well so they can vote. In addition to the Cal Cities event, Councilmember Haskew and I are on the Downtown Next Committee, which is coming out of the Rebound Ad Hoc, discussing how a fee should or should it be calculated and how it would be calculated for restaurants using the public space for outdoor dining. Several stories in the media have come out in the last week, which should be used for understanding the situation, but not for any decisions the council has made yet. So I thought that there was a lot of media stories that came out, but we haven't made any of those kind of decisions yet, but it did give a good understanding of the background. At the last meeting, I was in Washington, D.C. for the Public Transportation Conference. It's a national conference, and I talked a little bit about some of the issues that we talked about that really every public transit agency in the country are talking about, and that includes how to ensure to the public that it's safe to ride public transportation, and how we're working together in different agencies, and staffing, which, as we just heard with some of the other areas, even Rossmore, which is really surprising to me as well, that pretty much every agency of any type is having staffing issues right now. So that's what really came out of that conference. But we also had the opportunity to learn more about zero emissions. And this is what I want to talk a little bit about at the County Connection board meeting that we discussed a couple of weeks ago. We're talking right now about where do we see County Connection buses moving to the next phase. And everybody's very interested in zero emission buses and moving away from diesel buses. And so we're currently weighing what is that going to look like. And we talked about some of those pros and cons. And what it comes down to is hydrogen fuel technology versus battery and electric buses. And to be honest, I didn't know much about hydrogen fuel technology, and I'm still trying to get up to speed on that. But the pros with hydrogen fuel technology are the range are like diesel buses. So you're talking about 400 miles plus. The range for an electric vehicle, much less. In fact, it has to constantly be recharged to make sure that you're getting that range. And the fueling time is much like diesel as well, where you're not going to be sitting for 30, 40 minutes looking to charge at even 70% an electric bus. So those are some pretty significant pros. The cons are the buses are higher than electric buses, higher cost for a high. No, exactly. Yeah, the height is about the same, but the hydrogen fuel technology buses, the cost for them is slightly higher. The fuel cost is moderately higher than fossil fuel or diesel. The infrastructure cost is higher, but the cost is reduced per bus as it scales up. So the more buses that are needed, if you go to a full fleet, it actually brings the entire cost down. The electric buses we discussed are lower range, recharging can take longer. They also experience degradation of battery life the longer that it's used, which includes weight. It also includes heat. If it's cold, you want heat in the bus. If it's hot, you want the air conditioning on. Those all take electric as well. And the grading of the roads. So interestingly, where the bus depot is in Concord, out near the Naval Weapons Station on Arnold Drive, when you take that on-ramp on to get to Highway 4 to come to Walnut Creek, that uses 40% of the battery power of that bus. Just that grade. Now, when you're on a flat area like Walnut Creek, the battery usage can go much longer, and of course, downhill, the same thing. But just gives an idea of how much of those battery power is used. So the board is discussing right now whether we're going to move to all electric buses, all fuel, hydrogen fuel buses, or a combination of both. And we'll be discussing that in the next 1 to 2 meetings. And we'll be hearing more about that. That'll definitely be in the news.
Yeah.
Yes.
I raised my hand.
You go first.
Thank you. Is hydrogen any more volatile than, or have you not discussed that?
No, we haven't really discussed it, but from everything that I've read on it, hydrogen is not volatile like hydrogen in the blimp, the Hindenburg blimp. It's not that kind of hydrogen. The hydrogen fuel technology is very safe, and it's all contained. And I'm not a chemist, so I can't describe all of the reactions there, but it is safe.
I have a client that's a hydrogen fueling company, and it's regulated by the fire code. It's above ground is how it's stored, but then you pump it at a pump like a traditional gasoline, but it is as safe, if not safer than gasoline.
Well, yeah, gasoline's volatile.
Oh, my turn. So my question is related to how many fueling stations would County Connection need to have? Can it all be done at Concord on Arnold Drive, or do we have to have fueling stations at other parts of the county?
That's the beauty of it. It can all be done at the depot. And so the buses, as they go overnight, can be refueled as opposed to an electric charging, which is needed at several different cities and stations, like, because we have BART, for
Evidently
example.
at the top of the on-ramp.
Right, right.
Okay, last question. My understanding from the people I know in the industry is that hydrogen can come from a variety of sources, and that some of the sources are far greener and some of them kind of look a lot like what we have now. Have you been able to identify a source of hydrogen that's green enough to meet the commitments that we're looking for?
So these will absolutely be part of the discussions, and from what I understand, sourcing is a challenge. and we do have to have the right places to be able to source from. So that will be a discussion as we continue to make this a decision on which way we go in how our fleet's going to look. And by the way, I'll just put a plug in for Walnut Creek. We still have the only 2 all-electric bus routes in the entire county connection system, our routes 4 and 5, of which the route 4, the downtown shuttle, is free, and the most widely used route in the entire county connection system.
So in case your staff needs a resource, SoCal Gas Company, which is part of Sempra, is basically preparing to create a very large system as the public utility around green hydrogen gas. So it'd be interesting to know what that utility is doing in the, basically SoCal Gas covers Bakersfield South all the way to where San Diego County is San Diego Gas and Electric.
All right, that's good. Thank you. And that's my report.
Good report. Councilmember Haskew.
Thank you. I am not only on the Accessible Transportation Task Force under Contra Costa Transportation Authority, but amazingly enough, they have asked me to be on the special committee who helps work out the problems so that when it walks back to the actual task force, we've hammered out the issues. And I was asked to be on it specifically because I was one of the few people that handled the first meeting really well. So I took that as a great compliment. Usually they say I talk too much. I met CCTA, had their actual meeting, and the item that I think most people will be most interested in is related to the Accessible Transportation Task Force. And that's, we authorize the agreement with the county to get $1,400,000 of startup money from the Measure X pot. While I was working on Contra Costa Transportation Authority, I went out to the groundbreaking at the McCollamy Trail, groundbreaking for the crossover of Highway 4 out in Brentwood. This has been a project that has been near and dear to a number of people at the supervisorial level as well as the people out in that area. And it's pedestrian and bike friendly, and everybody just really enjoyed it. The mayor is usually asked to go along on a ride-along on Meals on Wheels. And because of COVID, I was cheated out of my turn. And so I was allowed to do, last week? Yeah, a ride along with Meals on Wheels. And since the mayor was there and it was his official thing, I'll let him really describe it. But my driver turned out to be a former disc jockey. And I remember waking up to him every morning, and it was kind of old time. I want to thank Kevin because he substituted for me as at Transpac for a small teeny meeting while I was at the dentist. So maybe I'm not thanking him as much as I ought to. And then lastly, I think, is my driving slogan for this week. And it was very personal because as I was driving to City Hall, and I was at a very busy intersection with lots of turn signals and all that stuff, I realized that we should emphasize if you're the person, you're the car with the green light right at you, and I'm really kind of revving along thinking I can go really fast, the light has just changed. I looked up and somebody was running the red light in front of me, and so I'm glad I was aware enough to look up and make sure that they got out of the intersection before our team did, and I still made the meeting on time. So be careful even when you have the green light. That's my slogan for this week.
That's great advice. Thank you.
Wait. I forgot how I spent today. I went to the Redefining Mobility Summit, and this is something put on by the transportation people, Contra Costa Transportation Authority, and it was fascinating. because we were talking about what future roads would look like. They had demonstrations where freeways were essentially divided into two parts. One is for cars going both ways, and one is for all of the active transportation, walking and biking and scootering and all of the other things that will potentially happen. Then we had a building of the workforce of the future, and I wish we were all of you were there, because it had some really good ideas about how attracting and keeping them, supporting Mayor Pro Tem Silva's statement. There are three things that people want out of their job. They want convenience, they want it challenging, and they want it satisfying, and money. That's four. But there is a need to make their job mean something. A lot of people work because they're doing good, and if you can, as an employer, convince people that they're doing good, it can help you tide over the problem. In the afternoon, we had a development in air mobility, and there are going to be autonomous airplanes. And they talked about the development of drones and how one company is making drones that are strong enough to lift really heavy weights, and they are going to be used to help fight fires, because they can go at the dark when the pilots can't go, and they can deliver food and reserve supplies for the firefighters on the line. And I'm not so sure I feel really comfortable about autonomous airplanes quite yet.
But not for passengers, right?
Yeah, ultimately, yes. Oh, yes.
That's after I won't be here anymore.
Dead, yes. I'm pretty sure I'm going to not make it here, too. Thank you for the question.
Any questions about autonomous aircraft? I feel like this is an episode of Bill Nye the Science Guy. This is great. Good updates. And along with Mayor Pro Tem Silva, I serve on the Recycle Smart Board. She gave a great update. I would just note that I, too, moved off as chair and transitioned the gavel over to Renata Sauce, who's the mayor of Moraga, and very smart, capable leader. And I look forward to her leadership on the Recycle Smart Board. And I got a very nice plaque with a silver garbage can on it that I'll hang proudly in my office. Last Thursday evening, I believe it was, I and council members Wilk and Haskew attended the ribbon cutting for R.C. Fisher. R.C. Fisher is a third-generation independent insurance agency providing all forms of commercial and personal insurance, surety bonds, and benefits. They moved their headquarters to Walnut Creek in 1980 and were located on Ignacio Valley Road for many years, and then just recently moved to a new location at 1777 Botello Drive. So that was fun to participate in that ribbon cutting in person. It was the first time many people of that company had been to the office. So nice to see people in person. I serve as the liaison to the Youth Ambassador Exchange Program with our sister cities of Necheto and Shiafolk. And unfortunately, given the state of world affairs in Europe at this point and what's happening in Ukraine, I don't believe there will be a Youth Ambassador Exchange Program with either city this year or next year. Hopefully, or this year, I should say, and hopefully next year, next fall, we can resume, and that crisis will have been peacefully resolved. I had the privilege of representing all of you and the residents at the State of the City. Thank you for the kind words. I'm sorry about the technical difficulties. I'd like to thank Matt Bolander and Betsy Burkhart for the tremendous support they gave me in preparing for that, as well as Mayor Pro Tem Silva. And it was a pleasure to sit down and talk to the past president, Matt Gouchard, about a wide range of topics, economic development, climate resiliency, wildfire prevention and protection, outdoor dining. We hit on a lot of different things. Along with the Mayor Pro Tem, we were invited to have a Zoom call with the Consulate General of Mexico and the San Francisco Consulate General. and she brought her whole team. It was very impressive. And we talked about a lot of really fun things, economic development, cultural and social exchanges. We told her team about some of the programs that we've had at the Bedford Gallery, the Frida Kahlo exhibit, and the strategic plan for the Lesher, and some ideas of expanding that in terms of a Latin-themed festival. They were very excited about that, so we've started a dialogue there and look forward to continuing that. Councilmember Haskew and I did go to Meals on Wheels last week, I believe it was, and we divided and conquered. Councilmember Haskew went on a ride-along. I helped load many coolers of prepared meals into cars, and I was impressed by what a well-oiled machine they are, and the number of volunteers that came through, that the Meals on Wheels staff knew by sight, pulled their chart and said, okay, you need 4 red carts and 6 blue carts, and we got them off on their way and got a lot of meals delivered to some seniors in our community. But that felt really good. And then finally, I had the opportunity to host a group of Cub Scouts from Valley Verde Elementary. The chief was kind enough to invite them up. He wanted to meet them, and they were very interested. They loved his office and meeting him, and asked about how he got into law enforcement and what he does on a day-to-day basis. So thank you for being generous with your time, Chief, and also to John Haithcock, who showed them the ins and outs of the detention facilities here in the city, got to lock them into one of the cells, which they thought was a lot of fun. And then we had a good conversation about our council priorities and what the council, how we function and what we do on a daily basis and how the city runs. So that was a fun event. Good seeing those young men. A lot of them all indicated that they were going to continue on with Boy Scouts and pursue their Eagle Award, which was really great. So that, I think, does it for council considerations, and we'll move on to our public hearings. We have one public hearing item tonight. It's to waive the reading and introduce an ordinance approving Walnut Creek Police Department's Policy 708, military equipment, governing the funding, acquisition, and use of military equipment as required by Assembly Bill 481. At this time, I would invite Chief Knox to introduce the item.
Thank you, and good evening, Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council, and members of the public. Jamie Knox, Chief of Police for the city. Last year, Assembly Bill 481 was introduced into legislation and subsequently signed by the governor, requiring all governing bodies to approve a military equipment use policy. And this isn't unique to Walnut Creek. Every agency in the state has to accomplish this, at least starting the process by May 1st. My understanding is there are well over 500 law enforcement agencies in the state. So at this time in your agenda packet, you'll notice that there is a proposed departmental policy on the use of military equipment. There's a proposed ordinance and then 3 separate inventory sheets that list the various items that are classified as military equipment under this bill. And with that, I would invite staff down to give a brief presentation on the Assembly bill, and then we'll be happy to answer any questions. First up is going to be Lieutenant Drew Olson, who is a watch commander. He's also our Emergency Ordnance Disposal Commander, or Bomb Unit Commander. He also oversees our drone program, and then after he speaks, we'll hear from Lieutenant Bruce Jower, who is our Senior Patrol Watch Commander. He is also our commander that oversees our firearms program, and he also oversees our defensive tactics program.
Thank you, Chief. Mayor Francois, council members, thank you. So on September 30th, 2021, the governor of the state of California signed Assembly Bill 481, requiring law enforcement agencies to have a military use policy approved by their applicable governing bodies, the City Council, prior to acquiring or continuing to use any equipment defined as military equipment per AB 481. The police department's proposed military use policy is required to be approved by ordinance at a regular meeting of the City Council. AB 481 says the public has a right to know about any funding, acquisition, or use of military equipment, as well as a right to participate in the decision to fund, acquire, or use such equipment. AB 481 allows the City Council to approve a policy allowing the police department to seek funding, acquire, and use statutorily defined military equipment within its jurisdiction only if it determines that such equipment meets specified standards. The city ordinance and any approved policy are subject to annual review by the City Council. Upon review each year, the City Council may renew the ordinance and policy, repeal authorization for particular equipment where standards were not met, or require modifications to the policy. AB 481 requires publication of the department's military equipment use policy, including an annual inventory report on the department's website 30 days prior to any public hearing concerning military equipment. The department's draft policy and draft military equipment inventory were posted on our website on March 4th, 2022, more than 30 days prior to this meeting. Attached to this agenda report, you will find the Police Department Military Equipment Lexipol Policy, the proposed ordinance approving the military equipment policy, and the Military Equipment Inventory Report. The inventory report is broken up in 3 sections: the Patrol Bureau Military Equipment Inventory, the Bomb Squad Military Equipment Inventory, and the SWAT Team Military Equipment Inventory. And with that, I'm going to have Lieutenant Jower come up and speak about what is on that inventory.
Thank you. City Council, how you guys doing? So as far as the inventory, as Lieutenant Olson mentioned, it's broken up into 3 categories: patrol, bomb, and SWAT. We have 4 different types of less lethal projectile launch platforms, and they are the kinetic energy less lethal shotgun, the 40 millimeter less lethal multi-launcher, the 40 millimeter single launcher, and the pepper ball launcher. And also included in this inventory, we have the associated ammunitions that would go with these launchers, such as the Super Sock beanbag round, which goes with the kinetic energy shotgun, the OC pepper ball rounds, which would go with the pepper ball launcher, and we have a variety of 40 millimeter rounds, which would go with our 2 40 millimeter launchers. To describe a little bit about the different kinds of 40 millimeter rounds, we have a less lethal direct impact round, we have a less lethal high velocity, we have a 40 millimeter OC, which is pepper tear gas agent round, we have a 40 millimeter paint marking round, a 40 millimeter aerial warning round, a 40 millimeter muzzle blast CS round. In addition to this inventory, with the bomb and SWAT categories, we have drones, we have bomb robots, we have tactical SWAT robots, we have explosive breaching tools, and the LRAD. And what the LRAD stands for is a long-range acoustic device. So in a nutshell, that summarizes what our inventory includes. At this moment, both Lieutenant Olson and I will be happy to answer any questions.
That's great. Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Lieutenant Olson, Lieutenant Jower. Any questions of staff on this item? Councilmember Darling.
And I have a few questions, mostly because I didn't live through the experiences of 2020. So I really wanted to focus in on, first of all, generally, the equipment that's in this inventory. How frequently do you think it's used, especially the SWAT and the less lethal projectiles?
Okay. To put it into perspective, in 2021, we had about 35,000 calls for service. Officers made about 1,000 arrests. And for the whole entire year of 2001, we had 1 incident where we had to use the less lethal launchers. And in this 1 incident, we actually had 2 applications.
Okay. And then I'm assuming for each piece of equipment, there's specific training so that the officer that's using it can use it safely. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And then what level of authorization do you typically need to use less lethal? I cannot say less
It's very,
lethal.
yeah, less lethal.
Less lethal projectiles and CS gas.
So as far as authority, every officer is trained annually. They receive training when they attended the basic academy. As far as their authority to use it on a day-to-day basis is up to their discretion. So they don't have to get approval from a supervisor depending on what call they're on. If they need that tool, they've been trained and certified to use that tool.
And if I could just add to that, so standard issue equipment to each police officer includes OC spray or oil resin capsicum, which is a lacrimator and an irritant. So the launch projectiles we have is just a safer way to deploy that at a much longer distance. So we have projectiles that would deploy the OC gas, and we also have projectiles that would deploy the CS gas, which is also an irritant and a lacrimator. Just means it makes you tear up.
Okay.
And as far as to use like an actual CS canister, we would need the watch commander approval or the incident commander approval if there's an operation going on. But what Bruce was talking about was the actual 40 millimeter in projectile. Every officer has the ability to make that decision based on the circumstances in front of them.
Okay. All right. And then I saw on your inventory that we don't have a Bearcat, but the SWAT team does have access to them through neighboring jurisdictions. And are our SWAT operators trained on the Bearcat? And if they're deployed here in town, would our operators be involved in using the Bearcats?
So, yes, so the Central County SWAT team owns the Bearcat and it is available to agencies that request it. On the SWAT team, Walnut Creek Police Department has 8 operators that's on the SWAT team. They are trained on the Bearcat and they can drive the Bearcat. So in the event that we might request, we have the ability to operate that.
And then a request for a use of a Bearcat, what level of authorization? Do you have to go to the watch commander to get that authorization, or is the SWAT team?
It would be the SWAT commander.
SWAT.
And most likely, when that Bearcat is deployed, it would be with the SWAT team. It would be a SWAT team deployment, either on a planned ops or a requested ops.
Okay, and then I understand that relative to protests, that there has been some changes in law relative to use of CS gas and less lethal projectiles. What are those changes?
So you are correct. We have, excuse me, there's a new assembly bill. It's called Assembly 48, and that was enacted on January 1st of 2022. And this is a new law that puts different prohibitions on the use of kinetic energy weapons and chemical agents. And that basically states is that any law enforcement agency to disperse any assembly, protest, or demonstration except in the compliance of specified standards set by the bill and would prohibit their use solely due to the violation of an imposed curfew, verbal threat, or noncompliance with the law enforcement directive. So the only time that we can use chemical agents is to defend against the threat of life of serious bodily injury to any individual, including peace officers, or to bring an objectively dangerous and unlawful situation safely and effectively under control. So it's very specific in that new assembly bill on when we can use kinetic energy launchers and chemical agents.
Okay, but you could still use them if there's a threat to life or, you know, a riot type situation that's getting out of hand. You can still use them then.
Most definitely.
Okay. All right. So do you know what the statistics are on, I know less lethal rounds can injure, but I've never heard of an actual fatality. Do you know what the statistics are on that, or?
I do not know the statistics.
Okay.
Very rare.
Yeah,
I've never heard of it. I know that when they train us, they train us to target specific areas to minimize the risk of great bodily injury or death. So when our officers are trained, they're given specific target zones that should be targeting when they're using any of these types of weapons.
And when you're targeting somebody with a less lethal round, what are the actions that they're taking that would likely cause you to use a less lethal round on them? They're not just walking down the street, is it?
I mean, they could be acting violent towards others, violent towards us. They could have a weapon that the nice thing about one of these kinetic energy rounds or a 40 millimeter is that it gives us more time. So we get time and distance, and that allows us to make better decisions. So we can stay a little further away. We don't have to be right up on them for a taser or an OC spray. We can be much further away, and it gives our officers the ability to make those sound decisions and hopefully bring the situation under control without having to use any more force than what is necessary.
Okay, and then, so moving on to the breaching, we've seen cases in other parts of the country where people used no-knock warrants, breached a door, and had poor outcomes from that. If you're serving a high-risk warrant, how do you go about doing that? Is no-knock warrant something that would typically be used here, or do you do something else?
So I'll answer that question. So a no-knock warrant needs to be authorized by a judge, and we typically do not seek those. They're reserved for very volatile cases where there would be a propensity of loss of human life or some significant destruction of evidence. But any pre-planned operation would have to be sent up to the chain and usually lands on the operations captain's desk before final approval on something like that. We typically don't use them. I don't like them personally. They're very dangerous. Our fundamental mission when we go out to a pre-planned incident or even an emergency critical incident is to protect and preserve human life. So, in my experience and what our protocol typically is to do something known as a surrounding call-out, where we just use time and distance, where we slow things down and we try to get compliance from folks who are inside the residence that we need to exit.
Great, thank you. And last question, and I'll be done with my quiz. So an LRAD, I've never heard of those before. Are those used just for communication, or is there any other way that you could use that device?
So there is other ways to use that device, but Walnut Creek Police Department, we use it specifically for communication.
You don't use it for the other, like
No.
playing irritating music and trying to get?
No, we don't.
Okay.
And if I could just add to that, so we do have a proposed policy on our LRAD. We haven't issued it yet, but we expressly prohibit it from being used as a weapon. Where some other cities have authorized it to use it as a weapon, but we would not. We would only use it as a communication device.
Okay. Well, thank you, guys. I know this is a new area for me, and I've had a friend of mine walk through all this, but I wasn't sure how we were using them here. And I support the police. I want to see well-trained, well-equipped, well-educated, and accountability. So I appreciate your answering my questions today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Silva.
Thank you very much, and for being prepared to come here and explain all of this to us and to the public who may be watching tonight. One of the requirements under the new law is actually that we have a community engagement meeting. When did that occur, or is it yet to occur, and what did it look like, and who was there?
So that is yet to occur. My understanding, and the Assistant City Attorney is here as well, he can chime in, is that prior to our first annual report, if the council does adopt this ordinance.
It would be a year from now.
Correct. We would hold a public hearing, and we would still do some research to kind of flesh out what that would look like. But it could be a town hall, but it needs to be a place where people can ask questions and we can engage in a dialogue.
So, corollary to that, you have a Chiefs Advisory Committee. Did you have an opportunity to discuss this with the members of the advisory committee? And if yes, what were their thoughts?
Yes, we had a Chiefs Advisory Board meeting just a couple of weeks ago. Prior to the meeting, we did send out the draft agenda, policy, inventory sheets, and some other related documents to get their feedback. During the meeting, we had a conversation with, I think there was about 12, maybe a little less, about 10 members who were present. And I specifically asked them for their feedback on both the policy, the ordinance, and the equipment used, and specifically on the equipment, if anybody had any concerns with any of the proposed equipment on that list, and there were no concerns.
Thank you. So there were a number of references to collaborating agencies, mutual aid, large-scale mutual aid. And so I'm just curious, what is a collaborating agency, if we can define that? But also, when we have large-scale incidents, we often need mutual aid. And are we required under this new law, are each of our agencies required to report what the other agency might bring to the incident for their officers? How does this all actually work? And you looked, I'm sure glad the attorney's getting up, because you looked really confused, like, what?
I was going to answer that, but he would know better than I. Or you want me to? So typically, if we call for mutual aid or automatic aid from a collaborating agency, that would be the sheriff's department, that could be one of our sister cities where we need help, and typically they would use the equipment that they're authorized to use and that they've gone to council or their governing body to seek authorization for their use policy. We wouldn't necessarily govern that.
So we could see maybe different equipment than what we are talking about here tonight that we keep in our inventory and for our use.
That's very probable. Usually what happens is if we do have a critical incident where we're calling for mutual aid, we establish an officer in charge. Typically it's a watch commander, a lieutenant, but sometimes it could be a sergeant. They would set up an incident command, and they would assume tactical command of that situation, and any responding agency usually checks in at the command post and would advise us what equipment they would have. And it's our city, so we would set the rules of engagement, if you will. And everything on here, with the exception of maybe the LRAD is a little unique, is fairly standard fare, and most other agencies who could respond to the city would have very similar equipment.
And that was my last question, which is how similar are our neighboring sister cities? Not to be confused with our sister cities in Hungary and Italy. They're really different. How similar, what kind of equipment? So you're saying it's similar.
Yes, this is all very similar, very commonplace in most law enforcement agencies.
I did have one more question. I noticed tonight that we are inventorying the Bearcat that another city has. We are the bomb squad for the county of Contra Costa.
Correct.
Are the 18 other cities and the county, which have to go through this same exercise, basically having to inventory and report all of the elements of our bomb squad?
I don't know, actually. Nobody's called me, but
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not sure.
I mean, it's 4 robots, so if they want to inventory them, I can get
There's
them
no
to
truck involved?
Not that has to be inventoried for this, no,
Okay.
because it's not a command
So
vehicle.
it's for very expensive robots.
Yes, that the federal government paid for us, which is great.
So thank you very much.
Of course.
Good. Councilmember Wilk?
Thank you. And thank you very much for the description and explanation of all of this. I have a couple of questions. I think some have already been answered along the way, but there was a large inventory that was just given to us. So I guess my question is, what do you use, or what does the police department use that's not classified as military equipment? The car?
I'd say the vast majority of the stuff. I mean, our cars, everything that I wear on my belt, our vests, our helmets that we have for our officers for violent encounters. Yeah, I mean, there's still quite a bit of stuff that we have that.
Standard issue sidearms. We do have a patrol rifle program, but everybody is issued a rifle, so under the legislation that's really considered standard duty issue equipment, so it doesn't really fall within the legislation, but we do have that as well.
Okay, great. So going through the list, it seems that a lot of these items are for the prevention of escalating violence, like I'll use my terminology. I know that there's some scientific terminology here, but beanbag guns, drones, less than lethal paint marking, tasers. Is this true that these are in many cases used for the de-escalation of violence?
Absolutely. That's our goal is to de-escalate these situations, and if we have to use force, to use as little force as we can. But this gives us a tool to, like I said before, with the time and distance, and it gives us the ability to make better decisions by having more distance in between us and what's going on.
That makes sense. And I think I heard this, but I just want to make sure all the officers receive mandatory training for use in all of these?
Yes.
Okay. And are all officers trained in advanced de-escalation techniques as the council had directed in 2020?
Yes.
Okay. I think the rest of my questions were already answered. Thank you.
Good. Councilmember Haskew.
Yeah, right. Find something to ask. So I'm going to ask a bigger one, which is I have always been particularly proud of our bomb squad because we are unique there. About how many calls do you get a year? If you,
Yeah,
well, you'd know because you're in charge.
On average, an average year would be anywhere from 30 to 50 calls per year. I was actually just getting a text message about 20 minutes ago about a possible call. So, yeah, we get about 30 to 50 a year. I currently have 5 bomb technicians. I've got a 6th one that's about to attend school. And then I've been approved by the FBI to add 2 more spots as certified bomb technicians. So they'll be going in the next year and a half or so.
Yeah, thank you, and thank everyone in that service.
Appreciate
The SWAT team, do you have any kind of general statistic about how often are part of the component?
I want to say last year it was they had 1 call out, but the year prior they had quite a few. I'm not sure the exact number.
I don't have an exact number for you.
I don't want an example.
They got called out quite a bit the year prior. Or
Yeah,
maybe it
that was
2021.
2020 when
In 2021, they got called out quite a bit, but yeah, I mean they're doing great work. They're as the chief said, they have some pretty spectacular tactics, and our SWAT team, the Central County SWAT team that we work with our neighboring agencies is very talented, and they do a lot of really great work.
And we do have a specific protocol in place where if the SWAT team's going to be activated, all of the participating agencies, the chiefs are directly notified for input, and we have basically the final sign-off prior to the deployment on a pre-planned. On an emergency situation, the authorization lies within our watch commanders, lieutenant and above.
So it sounds like we have really good relationships with the cities around us who we work with whenever the time comes up. Do you have formal? How do you make this happen? This cohort happen?
So go ahead, Chief.
Just a lot of collaboration. We do have an MOU for the SWAT team and with the county and other county agencies for the EOD and bomb response. We do meet regularly and sometimes more often if it's needed to resolve some issues or discuss training, or we've had some personnel changes in leadership on our SWAT team, so we've added some new leaders and assistant leaders, but a lot of communication and collaboration.
Great, thank you. Well, I tried to come up with more questions. Thank you all. I'm sure I speak for the council. We are very proud of our police department. Y'all do a great job, and we are so grateful you belong to us. Well, not belong, but you know what I mean.
I think we all concur. And thank you for a great report. Thank you for making yourself available over the weekend. I had some questions. Most of them have been vetted tonight. The only one I wanted to get on the record, though, was the ordinance says that prior military use complied with the military equipment policy in effect at the time. So if you could just, it wasn't called the military use policy because this is a brand new law, but we had similar policies. And maybe the chief could elaborate on that.
Sure. So we did not have a specific policy on the use of military equipment prior to tonight's introduction of the proposed policy. However, in addition to this policy, we have several policies that govern the use of force We have policies that govern control devices, which is our kinetic energy devices, the gas, and then the impact projectiles. Since the inception of that program, we've had these policies in place, so we really don't have anything, with the exception of the LRAD, that is not spoken for in the policy, given very specific guidelines on who can deploy it, what training's required, if it requires supervisory approval, et cetera.
That's really helpful. Thank you. So unless there are any other council member questions, we'll open this up for public comment. If you're connected by Zoom, you'd want to raise your hand or press *9 if you're connected by audio only. I don't see any folks here in the chamber wishing to provide public comment. So I will turn to the city clerk and see if there's anyone connected by Zoom that would like to provide public comment.
We have no members on Zoom wanting to provide public comment.
Okay, then we'll go ahead and close the public comment period and bring it back to the council for motion, discussion. Any final questions? Councilmember Wilk.
Yeah, no final questions. I just want to say that, to me anyway, the broad use of the term military equipment seems to be a catch-all for almost any police equipment other than the sidearm gun, which actually is more lethal than most of the equipment that's listed here. And to me, the term military equipment is overly broad and not indicative of what most of these items are. Most are for the less than lethal force, which we as a council have advocated for and asked our PD to become skilled in, like beanbags or tasers. And others are to protect officers from being in potentially harm's way, so like a drone. And I don't see why it would typically classify as military equipment like machine guns, bazookas, rocket-propelled grenade launchers, flamethrowers, grenades, and the like, which I would be opposed to. The difficult truth is we need to have a police department that is equipped in dealing with highly volatile and dangerous criminals, not knowing when or where they may appear. And it doesn't mean that the equipment on hand is needed most of the time, and it sounds like it was used once last year out of 35,000 calls, or even any of the time typically. But to not be prepared leaves the police department, and more importantly, the public, in a compromised position where the public safety needs are of the highest priority. And as we can all attest to, because we were all sitting here on the council last November, the community was outraged, and understandably so, at the organized retail theft at Nordstrom. Thankfully, no weapons were fired then, but we have to have the resources on hand to protect ourselves as a city and as a community in situations where the public is threatened. And of the equipment mentioned, I look at these items as tools of a city's police department and not as things that would be only used by the military, like a bazooka or a grenade launcher or machine gun. It's a misnomer to call this equipment listed on the agenda report as military use equipment, in my opinion. And I will support the Walnut Creek Police Department to be prepared with the equipment needed to protect the public and community and reduce potential violence and violent crimes. So I will be supporting this.
Councilmember Darling.
And thank you all for coming tonight. I think this is an important part of the process. You know, equipment is only as good as the officers operating it and the policies that control when it's implemented. And you can take many of these things and wreak havoc. But it sounds like in my conversation with Chief Knox, my questions here tonight, that we now have good, strong policies that identify how things can be used, which situations it's appropriate for them to be used in, what the safeguards are to make sure that there isn't misuse. And I'm very comfortable with the policy as it's presented tonight. I think it gets to that openness with the community about here's what we have, here's how we're going to use it, here's how we're going to use it to keep you safe, and here's how we're not going to misuse it. And I think that gets to the police force that we can all be very, very proud of. So thank you for coming tonight, and I'm supportive.
Mayor Pro Tem Silva.
Thank you for the work that you do on our behalf and on behalf of the entire community. The community, first and foremost, wants to be assured that our neighborhoods and our downtown are a safe place for us to live, work, play, and pray. And while I agree with Councilmember Wilk, the term military is an unfortunate term, but I think it's also federal and not just the state defining it, but I may be wrong there. The important thing is that our police force is appropriately equipped, appropriately trained, appropriately educated, and appropriately permitted to be able to use the tools that are necessary to protect the public and to protect our officers when a crisis occurs. Thank you for the work that you do, and I'm happy to move the item.
Is that a motion? Because if it is, I'll second it.
I will move to introduce and waive reading of the ordinance approving Police Department Policy 708, military equipment, governing the department's funding, acquisition, and use of such equipment.
Second.
Councilmember Haskell, any comments?
No, my fellow council members have so eloquently explained what it is that sometimes is necessary and really how spectacular and how lucky we are to have a team that cares very deeply to use all of their instruments and beyond just the military one to keep our community safe. So thank you all for your work. You're wonderful. And I'm happy to pass it to you.
Thank you. I too want to thank the police department, Lieutenant Jower, Lieutenant Olson, Chief Knox, the whole department for what you do every day to protect and serve this community. I was sort of heartened to hear the chief's comments that we really had policies to deal with all of this equipment except for the LRAD perhaps. So I'll leave my editorial comments about the need for this law or these lists to the side. I appreciate that we're complying with it and being transparent and providing this information to the public. But I think we were already doing that before this. And so I applaud those efforts and would encourage us to continue doing what we're already doing. I appreciate that you took this to the Chiefs Advisory Board, even though that wasn't required, and got community feedback in that forum. And I too will be supporting this. And so I would ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Mayor Pro Tem Silva?
Aye.
Councilmember Wilk?
Aye.
Councilmember Darling?
Aye.
Councilmember Haskell?
Aye.
Mayor Francois?
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
All right, then we are at that time of the evening where we are about to adjourn, but before we do so, I'd like to recognize it's our city manager's 50th birthday, and we're not going to sing, but
Say it's your birthday.
no, I said we're not going to sing. At least I'm not going to sing.
No singing necessary.
We value and appreciate you, and the fact that you're here tonight instead of with your family speaks to the sacrifice you make for our city and our community, and we thank you for that, and we thank your family, and wish you a very happy birthday and a makeup celebration that beats tonight's celebration.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. I also did want to highlight that it is our Assistant City Clerk, Amy Hefner's birthday just last evening. So happy birthday to Amy as well.
Yeah. Okay, with that, we are adjourned.